So let me start with introducing myself. My name is Peter Szczepaniak, Piotr Szczepaniak, and I'm a senior product manager at Percona. And today I wanted to bring closer to you a topic that was actually close to my heart for the past over a year, which is database as a service and general differences between a public database as a service, private database as a service. What are the challenges? What are the benefits? What are the trade-offs? It's going to be very product manager perspective. Keep that in mind. I'm not going to dive very deeply into technical details. But if you want to have more technical discussion or any questions, we're going to be right into a lunch once I'm done. But we have a booth downstairs. You feel welcome, actually, to come by and talk to us. OK, so a lot of you are probably thinking, DBaaS, database as a service, do I need it, when it's valuable? And I'll do my best to show you my point of view on this topic. And my presentation today is going to be split into two parts. First of all, like I mentioned, I'm going to talk about benefits and differences between private and public DBaaSes. Hopefully make it easier for you to decide which one is for you. So we're going to talk a little bit when to use DBaaS, what are the challenges for who is actually a private DBaaS, and benefits of a private DBaaS. And then the second very often question that I hear, like, OK, I want to try, we want to attempt, we make the decision, we're going into a private or a public DBaaS. How long does it take to actually build it? Is it a year, 2, 5? So based on the example of our great host, Civo, I will walk you through the timeline, how long it took for Civo to actually build as a provider database as a service, which has even higher requirements and regulations. So this is going to be the second part about implementing DBaaS, how the journey looks like on a timeline. OK, let's get started. So when actually you need to use database as a service, right? And two things that are very frequently repeating in all the discussions that I've been having with customers and prospects are scale and ease of use. They're actually connected. The biggest thing that hits a lot of the companies is the scale. And starting with, like, there are a lot of teams, product teams, who have multiple different products. Each one of them have dev environments, test environments, production environments. And the infra team and the ops team just cannot keep up. It just doesn't scale well with the ops and infra team. And so you want to give the power to your devs, to your internal teams. But it also means it needs to be user-friendly, because these are not database folks, right? They know a little bit. They know how to handle it, but it needs to be user-friendly enough and keeps them away from harming either the whole environment or themselves. So if you think about DBaaS, most of you probably think like RDS, right? RDS, very well known, very well established, but is it user-friendly? Have any one of you seen actually a fresh person who never tried RDS before set up an RDS? I did. I put a couple of folks in front of a computer, more or less technically advanced. It was a nightmare. It took hours to set it up. It's actually not really user-friendly because of the complexity. And this is also one thing that DBaaS, one of the main goals of database as a service, is hide the complexity from the end users, from the devs. You don't want them to think about all those little toggles and things. You want it to be as simple as possible. Right. And so first thing, again, that comes to mind when you think about DBaaS, there's a lot of public DBaaS providers. And they do help solve a lot of the complexity. They do provide a lot of the features. But there are also some challenges with public DBaaS. Unfortunately, public is not for everyone, even if it's a cloud. And 5 things that I wanted to highlight, and again, are going to be very different depending on your organization, on your challenges that you are having internally, but a couple things that I saw kept repeating. And the first one is security and data privacy, right? We know clouds are very secure, and a lot of engineers put a lot of effort to put that security into those clouds. But we also know it's a multi-tenant environment, right? you probably have organizations know, or you work in organization yourself, where even having the slight risk of potential data breach is a complete no-go for you and your organization to follow with the cloud. Maybe with some of the databases you're running, maybe with all. So the security and data privacy is the challenge number one. Limited customization is the challenge number two. You're basically getting what you're getting. You need something specific, you need something tailored. Usually, unfortunately, it's not available. You either get what you get or you don't get it at all. And this lack of flexibility in many cases is actually a problem. Our technology of databases is very flexible, allow you to change a lot of the things depending on your specific use case, how to optimize that database engine for your application. And unfortunately, with a lot of vendors, it's not an option. Performance variability. Another thing of multi-tenancy, right? We got a noisy neighbor problem. You never know. This is your production database. This is your sacred part of your application, which you know needs to be flawless, because otherwise it impacts your business. And unfortunately, when you're in a cloud, and again, all of the cloud providers are putting a lot of effort to avoid this, but we still hear about situations where some data breach, DDoS attacks, caused actually havoc on the other users just because they were sitting in the same data center. Compliance challenges. Another thing connected a lot to the data security and data privacy. Compliance is also a challenge, especially if you work in an organization connected to healthcare or finance. These are huge, very regulated environments. And a lot of the cloud vendors are just not able to provide you the flexibility and the security levels to allow you to go into that cloud. And the last but definitely not least is a vendor lock-in. This is a huge problem. You go into a vendor, you start using their database. I just attended Peter Szczepaniak's presentation, and it's basically, they usually, hey, start for free, start with small. And it's kind of, he compared it to a first free heroin dose, which is pretty heavy comparison. But it is. They got you hooked, they got you in, now you moved your production environment, and now you'll never leave. You will stay there forever. All right, so the next question you probably think of is private DBaaS for my organization? And a couple questions that you can ask yourself and look at the answers to them to make the decision a little bit easier. Do you need flexibility with your deployments? Do you need to change those little toggles, adjust the configuration depending on the environment that you're deploying to? If the answer is yes, this is a first point towards private DBaaS solution. Do you want to hide the complexity and improve the user experience of your end users? Again, do you want your devs to be able to safely and securely deploy provision databases that are actually production level, grade, quality databases, but without all that crazy complexity hidden underneath? If the answer is yes, another points towards your own private DBaaS. And the last but not least, again, do you want it to integrate it with your existing environment? Maybe you're building your own private cloud within your organization, so all of your teams have actually similar level of experience as they would with AWS, but you can still control the costs, which is a big factor here as well. And again, if the answer is yes, another point for a private DBaaS. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what are the actual benefits of running private database as a service. And they're gonna, of course, a little overlap with the things we already talked about. Again, enhanced data security, a big, big thing. You are the owner of the infrastructure where your data lies. You have all the control. You can keep it air-gapped. There are thousands of ways you can make the data secure as long as you're the owner of the infrastructure that actually is hosting your data. Customization and control, another big thing. Because it's a private, you can customize it, especially if it's open source. You can do a lot of customization to tailor it exactly the way you want to use it, the way you need to use it. the way your compliance expects you to have it working. Predictable performance, again, you're controlling. There's no chance when you're designing your infrastructure and deciding when things will lie, you will never put your production database in a dev environment where just crazy things are happening. So that predictability and that ability to control exactly where it lies, that there are no noisy neighbors next to it, gives you a lot more confidence. Compliance and data sovereignty, and this is of course very important, and this is a topic that is getting louder and louder recently, data sovereignty especially. So ability for you to control where the data is stored, how is it stored, and ensure the highest security levels. Scalability and resource efficiency, again, running everything private. I heard some horrible stories about the simple mistake that was committed to production. And it was Friday, and the team went on a weekend, and on Monday, company goes in, and the AWS bill is about $12 million. That's a story that I heard. There was a simple mistake. They didn't know that over the weekend, their software was spinning up instances like crazy. And it generated a huge bill. These things don't happen, of course, if you run it private. You have a full control over the cost. You can scale up and down easily, horizontally, vertically, your databases if you're hosting and controlling your infrastructure. Right. So we pretty quickly got to our second part, but I think this is very important to a lot of you thinking about DBaaS, right? The question that I keep hearing is, okay, how long it's going to take us? How expensive it is? How complex it is to build your own database as a service? And we as Percona, we're providing our customers both with pillars, database engines, as well as our operators. So we provide you with all the tools to DIY a DBaaS yourself. And I have a great example of Civo journey, and thank you, Ian, again, for helping me filling that the gaps where I had them. Something that I really wanted to mention up front about that is Civo is a provider. They're not a user. And truth be told, if you're building your own private cloud inside your organization, you're building your own DBaaS, you're actually a provider yourself. You're providing to an internal team. But providing to external customers brings a lot more heavy lifting that needs to be done, at least in my opinion, in most of the cases. So when you're looking at the journey, think about it, that it was actually more complex than it would be for most of you guys here. And what I wanted to really stress out is that was actually quick, and they were really fast in delivery, which is impressive. But let's start with some things like, okay, what customers are actually expecting from database as a service, right? So they want to create high availability standalone database clusters. Check, makes sense, right? They want to scale them automatically as it's needed, either vertically or horizontally, depending on the use case, right? Of course, handling backups, restore, and all the operations around it, day two operations. This is a must-have for any database management tool. And last but not least, any disaster recovery needs to be as simple and as reliable as possible because data is everything. You think that's it? Of course, you need logging, you need monitoring, you need observability. There's actually a lot of elements that are going. What customers, what users expect when you say database as a service. That was also very interesting experience for me. When I started with Percona, I talked to 10 people. I asked them about database as a service and expectations, and I got 10 different answers and 10 different definitions of what it is. So but the expectation bar is really high, and people expect various things. Another challenge that Civo actually had to break through was they wanted to spin up the databases on a Kubernetes, which brings another layer. I don't want to say complexity. It solves some of the things, but it brings complexity on the other sides of it. So there were additional things that needed to be covered. Running customer workloads in isolated environments, super important. Data security, data breaches are complete no-go. Rely on using Kubernetes operators to control, manage the database instances, right? So in Kubernetes in general, we use operators, which are small applications that help us do the operations on the Kubernetes side. Kubernetes provides a bunch of tools and methods for you to interact with the software that is running in pods and containers, but you need to have that gateway, and this gateway are the operators. And of course, solution must be reliable, well supported, and able to support a multi-tenant environment deployments. Again, complex. There's a lot of network security that also goes into preparing and configuring everything. So we wanted just to point that out, that the Civo setup was actually very complex, and I'm really impressed with how fast they make it happen. So you ask, how fast? What do you think? If you would have to estimate, a year, 18 months to build your own, to become a DBaaS provider? Does this sound reasonable? It sounds to me still. No, they were much quicker. So what was the timeline of Civo Public DBaaS? So the initial research started in May 2022. And in general, Civo always looks for an external providers, but their experience, from what I heard talking to folks in Civo, the experience with external providers isn't that great, actually. It's usually hard to work with them. It's usually hard to talk about any custom modification, customization. And the cooperation, of course, starts beautifully, but as you go down the road, it's get rougher and rougher. So the initial thing was, let's build it ourselves. Let's create the operator. Let's create what we need and build everything from the scratch. But as a smart company, they did the research, and they found out there are plenty of ready-to-use solutions, and they also evaluated those solutions. Around September 2022, after all the evaluation, Civo decided to go with Percona operators. There was already a relationship between Civo and Percona. We were very keen to work with those guys to make our operators better and also allow them to build their platform based on it. So after all the internal specification and all the internal discussions, Civo decided to follow up with Percona and start with MySQL Percona XtraDB cluster. As Ian mentioned to me when we were talking, it looked mature, ready, and had all the features they were looking for in a DBaaS operator. And in January, they launched the beta. So it was like a couple months between the decision-making and launching the beta product. And it wasn't just, it was available in their Civo dashboard. It was available with their CLI tool. It was available with their Terraform. It was a complete end-to-end solution that allowed their customers to deploy and provision database clusters for MySQL in the Civo cloud, which is impressive. They didn't stop there. In March 2023, they started evaluating Postgres operators. And similar, reached the same conclusion that the Percona operators actually mature and provide all the features that they're looking for. And after extensive research and testing of different Postgres operators, again decided in April to follow with Percona operator. And then in June 2023, Civo launched their beta for the beta DBaaS of PostgreSQL databases, and the same available via Civo dashboard, available via CLI, available by Terraform. So as you can see, about a year it took from the initial discussion, hey, let's build database as a service, up until both operators were released and available to Civo customers. For me, this is impressive. I thought that's much more complex, and it actually so happened that it worked really well. One more thing that I really wanted to highlight is one of the quotes that one of the responses that we got from Dinesh, who is a CTO of Civo. And maybe I'll give a little bit of a background story here first. So when we talk with Ian and Civo tries to approach external the providers of different tools, the biggest challenge that they're having there as a provider, they usually have a little bit of different requirements or something very specific as a requirement as a provider to the software, which a lot of the companies, the providers are not their core business, so they're not looking into providing it. And that's the beauty of Percona operators, which are completely open source. Civo found the thing that they needed, contributed to the code, to our open source. It was reviewed by Percona and released, and it's now available. This feature is now available to all operator users. And the quote was, Percona products are fully open source, which made it easy for us to contribute and collaborate with them. And it could run effectively for us as a service provider. Percona helped us to deliver DBaaS to our customers. And when I read this for the first time, it really gave me goosebumps. I love working for an open source company that provides open source software. But this story truly kind of showed me the power and how important it is. That is all I got for today. We're actually 4 minutes before, so we're not going to miss lunch a lot. But I'm here. Guys, if you have any questions, we can talk right now. If you want to go for lunch and you have any questions later, we're downstairs at Percona booth. We're going to have a raffle of amazing headset as well later down the line. Please come by and say hi. Thank you very much.